The Great Hall of the Galactic High Council was always quiet, but today it was a silence born of boredom. For 10,000 years, the 12 species sitting in the floating crystalline chairs had ruled the stars without challenge. They were old, powerful, and deeply arrogant. They believed they had seen everything the universe could throw at them. The meeting was supposed to be about something trivial, like mining rights in a distant nebula. But nobody was really listening. The delegates whispered among themselves, sipping glowing nectars, confident that their peace would last forever. They felt like gods looking down on ants, never expecting the ants to build something that could bite back. That feeling of safety vanished in a single heartbeat. The smooth walls of the chamber, usually displaying serene images of distant galaxies, suddenly flashed a violent red. A siren wailed, a sound so sharp and urgent that it made several of the insect-like delegates click their mandibles in panic. The high speaker, a being made of shifting pure energy, floated higher in his seat, demanding to know what was happening. The security chief, a reptilian creature with scales like armor, stumbled to the central console. His hands shook as he typed, his eyes wide with confusion. He reported that something had dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. It was not a fleet. It was not a diplomatic envoy. It was a single object, and it was ignoring every hail, every warning, and every defensive grid they had. The main viewing screen flickered and then stabilized, showing the void of space outside the station. When the image cleared, the room went deathly silent, and the drinks were forgotten. The whispers died. Hanging in the blackness was a ship, but calling it a ship felt like an insult to the word. It was a mountain of dark metal, stretched out over 40 kilometers long. It was the UNS Reezes, humanity's first Titan-class warship. To the Council, who built sleek, white, elegant cruisers designed for speed and grace, this human vessel looked like a weapon forged in hell. It was ugly, brutal, and covered in scars from simulations that no other species would have dared to run. It did not shine. It absorbed the light around it, looking like a hole in the universe where hope went to die. Panic began to ripple through the chamber. The security chief shouted orders, trying to lock the station's defense lasers onto the intruder. They wanted to show force, to remind this new species who was in charge. But before a single targeting laser could paint a human hull, the Reezes moved. It did not burn fuel or flare its engines. It simply shifted, sliding through space like a ghost, appearing directly above the Council station. The movement was so fast it violated everything the aliens knew about physics. The sheer mass of the human ship displaced the gravity around the station. Inside the chamber, the artificial gravity flickered and failed. Delegates who had been sitting confidently were suddenly floating, their robes tangling around them. Cups of nectar drifted into the air, spilling glowing liquid that looked like blood in the red emergency light. On the bridge of the Reezes, there was no panic. There was no shouting. The humans moved with a chilling calmness that was far more terrifying than the alien chaos. Irina, the commander, stood at the center of the bridge, hands clasped behind her back. She watched the screen showing the alien station trembling in the shadow of her ship. Her crew did not look excited. They looked like people who had been waiting for this moment their entire lives. They had trained for decades in the dark corners of human space, preparing for a war they hoped would never come. Now that it had arrived, they were not angry. They were just ready. The commander gave a single nod. On the underside of the Titan, a massive spinal cannon began to glow. It was called the World Breaker, and it was charging to only 1% of its power. Even that tiny fraction lit up the surrounding stars, casting long, terrifying shadows across the alien station. Back in the council chamber, the fear was palpable. The delegates huddled together, their natural defenses useless against something this large. The High Speaker tried to regain control. He projected his voice through the comms, demanding the human ship surrender or be destroyed. It was a bluff, and everyone in the room knew it. They had no weapons that could scratch the paint on the Reezes. Instead of a verbal reply, the human ship projected a hologram directly into the council chamber. It was a simulation. The aliens watched in horror as the hologram showed their own station being vaporized by a single shot. But it went further. The simulation showed the shockwave hitting the local star, causing it to go supernova. The message was clear. If the humans fired, not only would the council die, but their entire home system would be wiped out. There would be no survivors, no martyrs, just dust. The hologram faded, Mjörn leaving the room in darkness except for the red emergency lights. The silence was heavier than before. The arrogance of 10,000 years had evaporated in less than a minute. The reptilian security chief had stopped typing. The insectoid delegates had stopped clicking. They were just staring at the screen, realizing that their entire history of dominance was over. They were not the predators anymore. They were the prey. The commander's voice finally came through the speakers. It was not shouted. It was calm, steady, and echoed in every corner of the room. She told them that humanity was here to negotiate, not to exterminate. But she warned them not to make the mistake of testing the ship again. She said they built the Reezes for a reason, and she would hate to show them what it could do at full power. The High Speaker floated lower, his energy dimming in submission. He looked around at the other delegates. There was no debate this time. There was no voting procedure. They all knew what had to be done. Survival was the only option left. With trembling hands or equivalent limbs, they began to process the treaty. They granted humanity full sovereign status over their sector. They gave up mining rights, trade routes, and defensive zones without asking for anything in return. They signed the documents digitally, their signatures shaking as they finalized the transfer of power. As the transmission sent the approval to the human ship, the gravity in the chamber slowly returned to normal. The delegates fell back into their chairs, exhausted by the fear. Outside, the glow of the World Breaker cannon faded, but the ship did not move away. It stayed there, looming over the station like a guardian angel made of iron and fire. The commander watched the confirmation signal light up green on her console. She did not smile. There was no celebration on the bridge. They had won the first battle without firing a shot. But they knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and now everyone knew humanity was awake. The council members looked out the windows at the dark hull of the Reezes. They would never look at the stars the same way again. They had spent millennia believing they were the masters of the universe. Now they understood the truth. They were just tenants, and the landlords had finally come to collect the rent. The shadow of the Titan remained, a permanent reminder that peace was not given by the strong, but taken by the willing.